The other night, Tuesday night, was the eve of Shavuot, and we at Holy Blossom had the pleasure of learning from Imam Suleyman Demiray, the first Muslim chaplain in the Canadian Armed Forces. He and I had a conversation about the meaning of revelation in our respective traditions because Shavuot, the holiday, the festival celebrating the giving of the Torah, is the festival celebrating the giving of the Torah, and as it happens, we are now in the Islamic holy month of Ramadan, which commemorates the giving of the Quran in their tradition. I learned a lot from him. I think all of us who were there did. And one thing that really fascinated me, it moved me, was his description of what's called Laylat al-Qadr, the night of power, which is the night that Muslims believe that their prophet first received divine communication, revelation from God. The thing is, Imam Suleyman taught, Muslims do not agree what the actual date is. Except, like Jews don't agree on stuff either, but they have, 1 billion people, so it's way more disagreements probably. So they don't agree when this night of power is, but Muslims generally agree that it happened in the last 10 days of Ramadan, or the last 10 nights of Ramadan. So these last 10 days are especially important for the individual Muslim. Some people will meditate, pray, they'll study and recite verses from the Quran on their own. Some will do this as a solitary practice. And the Imam called this searching for the night of power. The Muslim doesn't know what night is actually the correct night, so they prepare themselves for all of those nights. It's like they're trying to reenact Muhammad receiving revelation. The night is hidden. I take that to mean that revelation is mysterious. It's ineffable. And yet, we can search for it. If we search, maybe we can find glimpses of it. I was thinking of this when I read the last verse of today's Torah portion, Naso. After long descriptions about the dedication of the wilderness sanctuary that the Israelites carried with them in their wanderings, we read this. When Moses went into the tent of meeting to speak with God, he would hear the voice addressing him from above the cover that was on top of the Ark of the Covenant between the two Kruvim. These were these two mythical beasts on top of the Ark. Thus God spoke to him. Let me read that again. When Moses went into the tent of meeting to speak with God, he would hear the voice addressing him from above the cover that was on top of the Ark of the Covenant between the two Kruvim. Thus God spoke to him. In Hebrew, the verb root dalid beit resh is used 3 times in this verse. Lidaber, Moses went to speak. It means lidaber, to speak with God. And then it says midaber, the voice addressing Moses from above. And then the common vidaber, God spoke to him. The second verb, though, midaber, is weird. It occurs only twice in the whole Bible, here and in a revelation in the book of Ezekiel. The translation that I read in our commentary say he would hear the voice addressing him from above, this addressing. But it's not a good translation according to the medieval commentator Rashi. He says midaber is a reflexive form, meaning something that's done to oneself. So he says, it is respect for God to say here that God was speaking to God's self, and Moses heard from his inner self. God was speaking to God's self, and somehow Moses heard that. God was not directly addressing Moses, says Rashi. The 20th century thinker Yeshayahu Leibowitz comments on this comment. In other words, when the Torah states midaber to him, the words to him really mean to God's self. Moses heard God speaking to God's self, and Moses heard from his inner self, from inside Moses. Moses, I'll say, quote, heard. This was not an acoustic event in which the sound reached Moses, but there was a process in Moses' self-awareness whereby, in the bold words of Rashi, he heard God speaking to God's self. He became aware what was happening in God. He understood God's meaning, and he heard God's voice from within his own self. So Moses didn't literally hear anything in his private moments in the tent of meeting, but he heard God, and therefore knew what to teach and to command the people. Rashi doesn't cite his source here. In fact, ancient translations of the Torah don't take special note of this word, midaber, as our translation doesn't either. It doesn't make it reflexive. It says it's God talking to Moses. But Rashi saw something interesting in this text with this weird word, and he had an intuition of what revelation is really about. Communication from God, what it's really about. Maybe it's not the thunder and lightning and earthquakes of the Sinai story. It is, quote, hearing silence. It is important to note, I think, that Moses went searching for it, like a Muslim searches for the night of power. When Moses went into the tent of meeting to speak with God, says our text. In our day, many of us, myself included, never go into this tent of meeting. We are too busy to stop and listen or even ask the question, what is God saying to me? Many of us question a belief in a God out there somewhere. If God is some kind of separate being and I don't hear or see him, and I say him on purpose here, then what is the point? But I want us to think a little bit differently. Maybe God is not totally separate, some guy out there, but God is in everything and everyone, luring us, drawing us in for relationship, for some kind of conversation, but we don't pay attention. We are busy. The contemporary Rabbi Bradley Shavuot Artson writes, if God permeates creation and works within and through creation, then the question is not longer, does God communicate? Since in some important ways, everything can be a manifestation of divine creaturely communication. As the psalmist notes, the heaven declares the glory of God. God's glory is not restricted to words, but is found in the starry skies, in the planet Earth, and in the poet's own conscious awareness. Later mystics attest to that same insight. Quote, all that people see, sky, earth, and its fullness, are God's outer garments, manifesting an inner spirit, the divine which permeates them. God is manifest in all. Guided by this renewed insight, we can seek God in the world, in each other, and in our own interiority. Hikes, hugs, and quiet contemplation offer moments of Gilui HaShekhinah, occasions of universal revelation to those who approach the cosmos, each other, and themselves with receptive wonder and expectant silence. God midaber. God is speaking to God's self all around us. What would our lives be like if we listened? If we lived our lives in awe and wonder at God's love, justice, compassion, and beauty in the world, We might be open to learn lessons on how to increase love, justice, compassion, beauty in our world. Our moments of contemplation and solitude, our moments of joy and community, our moments of love and relationship, all can be filled with revelation, like Moses in the tent of meeting. Our moments of seeing a bar mitzvah dedicating himself to this search. Now, we do need some humility. We're not Moses. In the early 70s, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, the great rabbi, the scholar, the social activist, was asked in an interview whether he himself is a prophet. And Heschel answers, "I won't accept this praise. It is a claim almost arrogant enough to say I am a descendant of the prophets, what is called B'nai Nevi'im. So let us hope and pray that I am worthy of being a descendant of the prophets." We can all be descendants of prophets, hear glimpses of God speaking to God's self. We have to open our ears, open our eyes, and go searching for that relationship. But when one claims that God is talking to them, dangerous things can happen. We have to be humble. If this, quote, God is not speaking with love and compassion, it is not God. And this person is not a Ben Navi, a descendant of a prophet. Maybe we should weigh what we hear from God with the collected wisdom of our ancestors found in our texts. God revealed and is revealed in our Torah. And they were written by humans. Let me say that again. God revealed the Torah, is revealed in the Torah, and the Torah was written by humans. As Rabbi Artson writes, that revelation can emerge as a verbal expression and in Torah is indeed the harvest of generations of Israelites who listened faithfully and distilled their insights into stories and laws. To the degree that their attentiveness is an expression of God, to the extent that God guides their discernment, to the degree that their ethical reach reflects God's breadth of vision and depth of love, to that degree that the Torah we actually possess is an inexorable human and divine. As with every other aspect of existence, the fusion is pervasive and irrevocable. The Torah, being human and divine, means that we can search for God's will and voice and critique it at the same time. The Torah can reveal to us in private study, and especially in partnered or group study. Probing, questioning, searching helps us to listen. God midaber. God is speaking to God's self. Are we listening? Are we searching? Are we asking the question, what does God want? What does God want from us? Again, humility is in order. When one claims that they know what the text really means, and what it means is not love, justice, compassion, and beauty, beware. They might be worshiping a text and not a living God. Psalm 19 says, "There is no utterance, there are no words, their sound is not heard. Yet their shout rings throughout the earth, their words to the end of the world." God in the world, in our texts, is speaking to us. Are we listening? When we see someone who is hungry, do we hear God? When we see a couple under the chuppah, do we hear God? When we see a young man reading the Torah for the first time, are we listening to God speaking to God's self? When we are suffering in a hospital bed, do we hear God? When we are quiet and alone, sitting on the lake at the cottage, do we hear God? Moses went into the tent of meeting to speak. We can live our lives that way. Maybe not all the time. With a little practice, with a little patience, we can some of the time. We need to search. If we let God's silence, God talking to God's self, break through the noise. Shabbat Shalom.